Hi everybody, I'm Tony Schaefer from What Drives Us, and this is one in a series of videos I'm making about hypermiling. Now in this video, I want to talk about how music directly affects the way you drive. If you've watched the first 4 videos, you know that I set the stage about hypermiling, why we hypermile, and general cardinal rules about how to behave while you're hypermiling. This is the first video, video number 5, in which I start talking about how you directly interact with your car. I chose to start with music, and that might seem a little confusing. I mean, why does music affect hypermiling? I hope over the next few minutes you'll begin to understand the connection. Let's talk about music in general and how music affects us outside the car. For example, if you walk into a retail store and they're playing popular music, multiple studies have shown that consumers are more likely to listen to the music, to sing along and dance, and they're not going to purchase as much. If you go into a restaurant and they're playing slower classical music, you're more likely to sit and chat and eat a little slower. Except restaurants don't want that. Well, some of them don't want that. They would rather turn the tables. So those restaurants will play slightly more upbeat music in order to get you to eat just a little bit faster so they could turn that table maybe 1 or 2 more times that day. If a retail store plays classical music, people tend to make more expensive purchases. If they play slow and relaxed music, people are less stressed and they're not really concerned about how many items they put in their cart. So they'll make more purchases even if they're not big ticket purchases. And what about movies? We all love going to movies. Could you ever imagine your favorite movie without the score? Scores set the mood, and not only for a scene, but the overarching entire mood of the movie. They really get your heart pumping for the adrenaline scenes, and they try to jerk a tear out of your eye for the really emotional scenes. So with all these examples of how music affects the way we behave, why would we not focus on the music we listen to while we're driving? So if I haven't convinced you yet, I'm just going to come out and say it. Music not only can affect the way you drive, but it directly does affect the way you drive. Even if you didn't know that it does, except now you know. So over the next few minutes, we're going to talk directly about how that happens. From my initial examples, it should have occurred to you that there are 2 ways music can affect you. The first is subtle and subconscious. Remember the restaurant that plays slightly faster paced music in order to get you to eat faster? You're not aware that the music is affecting the pace at which you eat. But then I also mentioned stores that play popular music. And studies have found that the popular music actually distracts the consumers from actually consuming. So stores really don't want that. I'm going to talk about both of them, but I'm going to start with subtlety. And I want to get this out of the way right up front. Fast music makes you drive fast. There's no 2 ways around it. It really is that simple. If you are driving, listening to Sammy Hagar screaming, "I can't drive 55, there's a good chance you're not going to be driving 55. So you have to make sure that the music you listen to keeps you on an even kill. It doesn't make you want to drive fast, but at the same time, it doesn't lull you half to sleep. Now, you might think that I'm going to suggest that you tune into your local classical music station and just chill out to some classical music. And while that's a good idea, sometimes, for example, they might be playing a nice soothing string quartet, but they might follow that with something like Flight of the Bumblebee, which is the classical music equivalent of I Can't Drive 55. And eventually they might play something that is so relaxed and soothing that it half lulls you to sleep. And you don't want that either. As long as you're listening to the radio, as long as you're listening to what someone else plays, you have no control over the music you're listening to. So I'm suggesting that you put together a hypermiling playlist. Now, no, I'm not suggesting that you always listen to the same music until the end of time. This is just something to listen to while you're practicing your hypermiling techniques. Now, eventually, hypermiling will become so ingrained that the music will affect you less. It still will, but it'll affect you less. And you won't need to listen to your hypermiling playlist. Now, this playlist should contain songs, as you've already picked up on, that keep you at a level keel. Nothing that's really, really, really exciting that makes you want to drive really fast, and nothing that half lulls you to sleep. This is just music to have in the background because you know music is going to affect your mood, and your mood is going to affect your hypermiling. And it doesn't have to be classical music. I can't tell you what to put on it. This is entirely up to you. The classical music was just an example. You can use whatever you want, whatever songs help you stay in an even keel and just let you focus on what you're doing. Now, as I mentioned, music can also be a distraction. Everyone thinks they can multitask. As it turns out, everyone's wrong. You think that what you're doing is handling two things with exactly the same competence, and you're wrong. All you're doing is alternating from one thing to another. And what that means is, while you're focusing on one thing, you're not focused on the other. So you start focusing on that thing, now you're not focusing on the other. The funny part is, your brain is fully aware that it cannot multitask. And I can prove it. Remember that time when you were in an unfamiliar area and you were looking for the address of a house and you reached over and turned the radio down? Admit it, everyone does it. Do you know why everyone does it? Because everyone's brain says, that radio is distracting. I'm going to turn it down. Now you can focus on looking for an address. So your brain is telling you that it cannot multitask. And when you're driving, you're either focusing on the music or you're focusing on the drive, but you're not focused on both at the same time. Now, I've had some people say, well, I don't listen to music. I listen to talk radio, so I'm not as distracted. Well, that's worse, because when you're listening to someone speak, you're listening to the words, you're processing what they're saying, you have the context of what it is they're talking about, and the subtleties of their voice. It's a completely different type of distraction, but the end result is exactly the same. Here's something I think is pretty neat. Your brain actually craves some level of distraction. Studies have shown that the brain looks for something to focus on. So here's something I recommend you try. I recommend everybody do this. Turn the radio off and drive in complete silence for 1 week. 5 morning commutes, 5 evening commutes. Now that first morning, Monday morning, you will find yourself fidgeting because of how amazingly boring the drive is. And by that evening, and definitely by Tuesday morning, you will find yourself actually paying more attention to your car. You'll start paying attention to the things that were originally covered up by the music. You'll see things like how your engine revs up from a red light, or when you're going up a hill, or how the engine revs down as you're coasting down a hill. Now, most people will do one commute and they'll say, okay, I get the point, I'm done. Yeah, that's like doing one push-up and calling it a workout. That's not how this works. Only after a complete week of driving in silence can you even begin to pay attention to the car and how you're driving that car. But I'll tell you what, after 2 weeks, you will become a Zen-like attentive driver with a connection to your car that you didn't know you could previously have. So what have we learned? We've learned that music directly affects your mood, your shopping, and your driving habits. We know that businesses have been taking advantage of you through music for years. You should listen to calmer music while you're driving, and I recommend that you make a playlist. We know that fast music makes you want to drive real fast. Talk radio, on the other hand, forces you to pay attention to the speaker, which causes you to pay less attention to your actual driving. And in my opinion, the absolute best thing you can do is to go 1 or maybe 2 weeks in absolute silence so that you can pay full attention to your car. Now, at the very beginning, I mentioned that it might seem really weird that I'm starting with music. But now you understand why I think this is quite possibly the #1 hypermiling tip. Because after all, subsequent videos are going to bring in other techniques, and if you're otherwise distracted, you're not going to be able to properly apply those techniques. So first, become fully attentive to your car, and then you can apply the other techniques. So before you watch the next video, take a week or two, make that playlist, drive in silence, and become one with your car. There's no hurry. The other videos will be there when you get back. As always, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you want to watch more videos about hypermiling, be sure to visit the What Drives Us YouTube channel. This is where you'll find our weekly podcasts, car reviews, and a lot of other things. We record our podcast live every Wednesday night with a chat room. We'd love to have you in the chat room. If you want to be notified when the show starts, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell. Thanks again, and remember, I'm not asking you to drive less, just drive better.